We are recording.
Hello, Steven, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Clem Fandango. I love that so much.
I do too. As soon as I heard it, I knew I will never be able to greet you any other way and feel right.
I do love that that's become our call sign over the last, how long has it been? Like 18 months we've been doing that?
I think a little less than that. I think I found that one 3 or 4 months into lockdown. So like summer 2020. And then I sent it to you.
That sounds about right, because I keep describing this to people that it's like there were 3 COVIDs last year. There was Tiger King COVID, there was BLM COVID, and then there was election COVID. And I think I started watching Toast of London mid BLM COVID.
Yeah, I mean, you might measure them by, the external social movements. For me, it was just the degree of my panic attacks.
Yeah, yours, the way you described it to me, it was more like notches on the wall of a prison cell.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, I could count it in Netflix series watched. I watched many things that I would never have watched otherwise, because what the hell else was there to do? It's like a sort of digital Stockholm syndrome. Like, I don't think Friends is that funny, but I watched all 9 seasons because what else was there for me to do?
Yeah, I don't even remember what my guilty watch was last year, because I decided to watch The Sopranos for the first time, which was a tall order, and that was hot on the heels of all my relationship stuff last summer. So basically I would self-medicate and watch The Sopranos until I passed out every night. Then the next night, whenever I settled in, I would have to backtrack by 1 episode and restart, because there was always about 45 minutes in there that was completely hazy for reasons. So yeah, that was a fun year. I'll never forget what you looked like when you got off the plane, when you finally escaped. And I guess now's as good a time as ever to catch up, whoever the hell still listens to this, and just say, I am on mic with my sister. You're being introduced. Say hello.
Do I have to?
It would be polite.
Oh, okay. Hello.
My sister, Margaret K. Gray. We call her Meg. Call her Megan if you want to make an enemy.
Please don't.
And she has been abroad for the better part of the last 4 years now.
I mean, it's been off and on for a while,
Yeah.
but this most recent stint, it's been a little over 2 years. We're coming up on like 2.25, not quite 2.5, but yeah.
Yeah, doing your doctorate in the UK.
Yep.
So if any of the people listening to this know me in real life, you're familiar with my self-effacing joke, which is my brainy sister is doing her doctorate overseas, which frees me up to be a layabout photographer on the beach, and mom and dad still have a kid they can be proud of at a party. Meg, you have made my life so easy, and I am grateful.
Well, I think you do both of us a disservice with that, but at the same time, happy to oblige.
It's nice when you help. And
I try.
Hand me my phone. I just realized it's unlocked like a time bomb. It could go off any second. Grazie. Let me just put this on Do Not Disturb so I don't do that thing that always annoys me when other people do it. There we go. All right.
Thank you for respecting my time.
Well, thank you for being here. It's January 2nd. We are a week out from Christmas, and you've been back in the States for as long as your visa will allow, pretty much.
Yeah. It's been, by the time I go back, it'll be pretty exactly a calendar month. So it's been a good break. It's been nice just to have a change and kind of get reacquainted with a different side of life, I guess. I mean, I've almost forgotten what it feels like, to be honest, to just live a little, to not be constantly thinking about writing or work or the library or, just all these little nitpicky things that come up. And of course, praise God for DeSantis and freedom. which for anyone who doesn't know or doesn't appreciate political nuance, like as much as much like my darling brother, I'm not strictly speaking conservative or liberal when it comes to politics. I'm very much libertarian. I'm all about personal choice, personal freedom, but I do appreciate, can I just say common sense? Some call it the Sweden approach, some call it the DeSantis approach, but having lived very much in the other
extreme.
Yeah, the other sort of plane of the COVID experience where we've been micromanaged, and it's quite literal psychological torture where even when we're released from certain restrictions, there's always, well, if it can change at any moment. We're monitoring the data. We're monitoring the data, and I mean, you can go outside, but only in certain weather or certain amounts of people.
Every time you do that voice, my blood pressure screams out my ears.
So does mine.
So please don't.
Welcome to my experience of the last 2 years.
No, I get it, and I'm really glad that this can be your oasis to get away from that.
Yeah,
for a while,
yeah.
I mean, all politics aside, I really am grateful for the freedom we enjoy.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, we've talked about this. I was briefly flirting with the idea of moving out west at some point this past year, but every other state has been back and forth on the restrictions, and for better or for worse, Florida just decided to rip the Band-Aid off and get the herd immunity experiment out of the way. So I've been glad for just some constancy, you could say. And it's really hard to imagine going anywhere else right now. I mean, I'm glad that there are some, Omicron notwithstanding, it looks like the UK might be trending in a better direction as far as giving you room to breathe.
Knock on wood.
Well, there we go. But I hope that, it's not going to be too much reverse shock when you go home in a few days, because it's always the little things. Everyone wants to talk about big standout issues. They want to talk about appeals to large scale emotions and that stuff. That it's a conversation that has to happen. It has to play out. But the little things are what I'm most grateful for these days. It's the ability just to leave the house and go sit in a Waffle House and drink coffee.
Oh, I miss Waffle House.
That is still my, this might sound so trite, but it's the thing I'm still most grateful for right now is just those little things that make me feel like life is normal.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not trite at all. And I think especially over the last year, regardless of where you've lived out this, fever dream, that I don't know how else to describe the last 2+ years now, or almost 2 years, I guess. No, I think those little things, I mean, you can't help but feel trite saying it, but it is true. It's absolutely true. It's those little things, those little normalcies we take for granted are oftentimes very much the difference between a healthy, normal life and dystopia, which to some degree, again, speaking from the other side, where we're constantly having just the right to go to a cafe threatened, or even the right to see a colleague indoors is threatened. Whether they actually do it or not is another question. But that constant fear of, are they going to reverse it? Just the idea of constancy of any kind makes a huge difference. So yeah, I second everything you're saying with just a little tinge of jealousy, but I'm also grateful in my own right, because it's easy to beat up on the situation and on the powers that be that have caused it, or how I feel about the way people talk about it. We could go on about that for hours, and we have off mic.
Well, that's I'd love to talk about something else, because I
agree.
We got up pretty late today, but we've spent around 6 hours teasing out these issues between lunch and I think we've been in close orbit of the kitchen island since 11 a.m.
Thereabouts,
talking mostly about this.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's it's that definition of an insanity, and that coincides with our internal drive to solve the problem, and it's a mutually, I'm trying to think how to say it. It's like this self-sustaining cycle of we're driving ourselves crazy by constantly staying in that mental space, but we also go a little crazy if we don't try to find a way out.
Yeah.
But the problem is you and I aren't in charge. So no matter what solution we come up with, it doesn't really matter. We just get annoyed that other people don't see what we believe to be the obvious solution. And then we're back to insanity and hating people, and never mind, we'll just stay at this kitchen island where everything is sane. Yeah.
I mean, you're not wrong.
No,
I've started calling my house the Pocket Universe, and I mentioned that earlier.
Nice.
But I mean, I've tried to set up this space specifically for that, where I can have people I trust over to just talk in a quiet environment.
A modern day salon.
Kind of. I mean, it looks more like the multi-purpose room of every condo building ever, but I've tried to make it nice. There's pictures.
Yeah.
There's stuff in places to make it look kind of homey. My cable management is still terrible by the TV, but that'll come.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I mean, I think, you know, most at this point, because I've let this podcast languish for so long, and the only people who still listen are largely people whom I know in person, and a lot of them are people whom I've met through social outings and work over the last few years. They know me, but they only know about you through me. And sometimes I have difficulty describing exactly what you do, because like I know as you tell it to me, but translating that to a stranger is sometimes a little bit on the convoluted side. So for the benefit of people who have not yet made the pleasure of your acquaintance, what is your degree track and what are you doing at uni?
So, okay. Well, let me pull up my notes, because I'm afraid my internal conception of my own work is just as convoluted as other people's attempts to explain it.
Here you are with notes, and I didn't get you anything.
Oh, well, you know. This is why you'll live longer than me and why you have more friends. Yeah, I should have pulled this up before we started talking. I had a feeling you'd ask me about this, because I do have it. I'm trying to remember where I put it, because most of what I do, I mean, if you want to just know the nuts and bolts of what I do, I've spent the first 2 years basically just doing a crap ton of reading and compiling notes and writing various tangents of thought, which will be edited into meaningful chapters. But
chapters pertaining to
the argument that I can't find. Where did I write it down? Anyway, basically what I work in is, I'll try to make this a decent elevator pitch. So I work in Victorian women's travel writing. That's the literary genre that I specialize in. I look at how female explorers, female tourists, accounts of foreign marketplaces and material objects. So that could be an art object like a piece of pottery or lacquerware. It could be an exhibit in a museum, fabric, textiles, you know, that kind of stuff. How that serves as a literal and symbolic basis to discuss the global political, economic issues of the day. So looking at things like global capitalism, industrialization, and how all of that feeds back into how they conceptualize national identity, how that feeds into their philosophies of art and heritage, and really looking at the consequences of industry and empire on that concept of national heritage. So as they're going abroad and, you know, in some cases, they're visiting territories which they have colonized or their government has colonized. In some cases, they're visiting what you might conceive of as a rival empire or a rising rival empire. In other cases, it's places that maybe they would like to colonize in order to capitalize on their resources. And as they go through, I'm taking apart their analysis of just regional art, regional trade and how it kind of feeds back into this constant loop of wanting to see their empire progress, wanting to see the British Empire expand, wanting to see global trade expand, but also recognizing that there's a loss. It's almost like in viewing the loss of heritage in other cultures that comes about through their participation in trade, they're beginning to kind of unravel what's already happening in their own culture. That the very thing that makes the empire powerful is what's eroding their sense of who they are as a people. So I'm sorry, I'm so bad at articulating this.
No, keep going. You're doing fine.
I'm bad. Well, concision has never been my gift, and I'm sure you will happily attest to that. But
thou art most verbose.
I am.
But it's fine.
Indeed. Well, thank you. I mean, it works out well. I've got to spit out 80 to 100,000 words to get this thesis approved. So that's where verbosity can be a bit of a benefit. But when trying to explain it to friends and family, I don't do a very good job.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the kind of person, I tend to pull a lot of threads into my work. I'm very interdisciplinary, so I pull from loads of different sources and, lots of different perspectives to try and put my argument together. And in doing so, I tend to confuse myself on the way to where I'm going a lot of the time. So,
and that's what makes it so entertaining for me. Not the confusing, but the number of threads that you pull is always intriguing to me, because when you talk about the multiple influences that go into national identity and how it's built up in some areas and eroded in others. And we were talking a little bit about Buddhism and Shinto earlier.
Yeah.
These very holistic identities where everything is tied up into everything else. Whether that's the intersection of religion and writing and art and architecture, or how trade is bound up with art and politics, and how all these things influence the other. It's really a lot of fun to, like you said, just pull the threads. I mean, we unwind ourselves in the process sometimes, but it's incredibly fun to hear how all these things that you don't know how they connect, when you really start looking into it, everything is braided together. Everything that makes a nation is
absolutely,
it's very interesting. And I'm a big fan of that philosophy, that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it, because so many of the conversations we've had echo things we see today, as far as where certain issues start and then how they branch out. And it's rarely a exact duplication, but it's enough to give you a sense of what the early notes in a certain variation on a theme are going to sound like, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I'm reaching for a metaphor here because I'm always a little bit intimidated to keep up with you that way. But
you undersell yourself. You really do. I can't keep up with myself half the time.
All I have is self-deprecation and a little smattering of self-loathing. Please don't take it from me. It's all I've got.
I mean, I could say the same, but
No, that's why we get along still.
Yeah. Oh, I think I finally found my thesis statement. That's where I hit it. So a couple months ago, I was compiling notes for a talk that I was doing at a neighboring university, and I was trying to summarize my project. I was trying to think, how in nuts and bolts am I going to characterize what it is I'm really trying to say? And it turns out in doing that, I actually came across the argument for my entire project, and I finally remembered where I wrote it down.
Wonderful.
So this is what happens in a PhD, is you end up with like 50 different files of drafts and subdrafts and subfolders of subdrafts, and then you can't remember where you put anything, because half of it is incidental. You try to write one thing, you end up writing that other thing that you were stymied on. All right, so in a nutshell, what I'm arguing is that by reproducing objects and their displays and contextualizing them with political, economic discourses of commerce, craftsmanship, and nationhood, Victorian women travelers became active participants in the commodification of global cultures according to their degree of technological and economic development and their potential as economic rivals to the British Empire in the burgeoning global capitalist marketplace. This, in turn, reveals the underlying cultural anxieties surrounding Britain's global capitalist agenda as the women compare the poor quality and aesthetics of British products to the industrial output of Eastern nations that maintained a stronger connection to traditional craftsmanship.
And that was all one sentence?
As 2 or 3. Again, concision is not my gift.
Yeah. Oh, that's the nice thing about being in the liberal arts is you can kind of expand as needed.
Yeah, but I get notes from my supervisors all the time. You need to cut this sentence. You need to divide. What is this?
Have you attempted going full Hemingway yet? Doing the whole write drunk, edit sober thing?
No, but then again, I would also I characterize my mental state over the last 2 years as being pretty much just not all there anyway. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that just happens on its own. I'm always writing like on 50% capacity. And by the time I come back to it later and look at it with fresh eyes, suddenly I go, what the hell was I saying? What is that?
I feel that heavily lately.
Yeah. So it's the same effect. Now it's a constant process of writing, rewriting, adding, subtracting, cutting, moving, reconceiving, panicking.
It's okay.
It is. I mean, if I didn't love what I do, I wouldn't be putting up with it. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of tedium. It's a lot of stress. I'm not gonna lie. A lot of anxiety, and when they talk about imposter syndrome, I mean that is just you can't be an academic and not just completely live in this well of self-doubt all of the time, combined with just that tiny bit of narcissism that I think I have something you need to hear, but I'm also not really persuaded that I'm doing it right or that I'm doing it better than anyone else. And oh my gosh, you're going to totally see that I'm faking. And I didn't read that whole chapter. I just cited the first paragraph because it's a good soundbite. But we all do the same stuff, and at the end of the day, I really do enjoy it. I'm really passionate about it, and it can be very meaningful. Sometimes not so much.
I'm really grateful, honestly, that our respective paths are both kind of in the vein of tortured makers more than managers, because it gives us so much to talk about.
It's very true.
Because everything you're talking about, obviously, I'm not doing it in as formalized a capacity as you are, and when I'm feeling the least charitable towards myself, I refer to my job as perspective for profit, because so much what I do is more process driven. It's a little less artistic. It's empty rooms and images that need to be super polished in order to sell hotel rooms to target demographics and target feeder markets for the hospitality industry. But the process feels very similar to what writers, what other people go through, is that you have to make it, but you also have to find it in the making and really tap into that thing that you're trying to capture. And for you, is the thing that you're trying to capture from your own mind, which is doubly difficult because I describe my mind as like a funhouse mirror maze filled with circus music and gunfire. And just based on some of our discussions, I'd imagine you have a similar descent into madness when you're trying to pull the ideas to the surface.
Yeah, I think of my mind more like a master control room in like a TV, broadcast room where I've just got all these different monitors and they've all got something different playing on them at the same time. And it's just trying to learn how to shut out certain inputs so that I can focus on the ones that I need. And sometimes it's really fun. And it's like, ooh, I can just kind of bounce around between them. But as soon as I try to articulate it to anyone else, it's like dial tone.
Right.
It's too much at once. So, for me, it's just a constant, I'm just ping ponging between my own tendencies to take on too much, get overwhelmed, and then get annoyed because not that I can articulate it, but why don't you understand what I'm trying to say?
Right.
And And, I find it very interesting that, I used to do drama, and for a long time I wanted to be like a singer and a dancer and an actor. And, I went after that for a little bit, and it was great. I had a good time, but, I came to the realization it was just a toxic world, that you're constantly having to seek other people's approval. And it doesn't matter how well you sing it in the shower. Once you're in front of a group of people that are judging every aspect of you, and they may or may not even choose you based on your ability. It doesn't even matter if you actually fit the part. They may just want someone else. Mm-hmm. It may just be down to interpretation. You could be equally great, but, well, I like that one better. They're taller. They look better next to that other person. It's like when you get down to those brass tacks, I just found that I can't live with that many variables. I can't live in a world where I'm not judged all the time. And I can't control it. I can't control how people see me. Because no matter how I try, I either feel like a phony, trying to give them what I think they want, or I be myself, and then I just worry about how much I failed to live up to expectations that I don't even know what they are. So I decided to go for a more stable job in academia, which is, it's funny enough, but, like, I really feel like it's exactly the same as the entertainment industry or any creative industry, because you are essentially doing the same thing. Everything you put out is for other people's approval, but there is more control, because it's like this weird mixture of art and science. Even in the humanities, we get laughed at sometimes for some of the ridiculous stuff that we call research, and even I will openly make fun of a lot of the projects that get funded these days. And I just, yeah. But there is it's a very technical and analytical process, but there is a creative element to it. You have to be able to think creatively. You have to think critically. You have to be creative to really do it well. If you want to be innovative, now you can be great at writing and great at research and not necessarily be very creative about it, and still get a PhD and still have a great career. Like, that's very, very plausible. That happens most of the time. But, this is where you and I are very much alike. We're not okay with just being okay.
Right.
We want to be the best. We want to change it. We want to do something different. We want to carve a niche for ourselves. So,
and it's rarely for anyone else. We are completely bored
unless
we're driving ourselves crazy.
Exactly. It's like, what's the point if I'm not So, in order to do that, to be that kind of researcher, you have to have a creative mindset. And I do approach my work very creatively. And of course, my undergrad, I ended up switching from drama to creative writing initially, because I was going to go into drama through the back door, that I'll be a writer. Because obviously, again, much more stable job. And it was through that I ended up finding out I was actually really, really good at literary analysis. And I found it more fulfilling. Not because I don't love creativity. I actually miss creative work a lot. I would love to bring that part of myself back. But I don't think I could ever fulfill my creative potential without fulfilling my analytical potential. So this is what I've chased down, and I kind of became addicted to it. And that's where feedback loops are very important. That's where I got the most attention, was for my analytical work. So I went after that. So here I am.
What was the inflection point with going from creative to analytical? When was the when was the moment where you felt it click a little bit and decided to lean into it?
It's kind of hard to say, because my motivations were always very mixed until suddenly they weren't. I think it was probably when I got rejected from Oxford for my master's.
Really?
So yeah, I there's no way to say this without sounding, I always feel a little pretentious saying it, but I did go to Oxford for 6 months during my undergrad. That was something that was that out of bounds dream that I never thought would come to fruition, but like, I really wanted it. I fixated on it to the point that I'm like, if I don't at least try, I'm never going to forgive myself. Because if I was going to do literature, if I was going to do this, I wanted to do the best. I wanted to be the best at it and be in the best environment. So
you're actually wearing your Oxford t-shirt.
I am. Every time I come to visit the States, I try to pack light, and I had left this in my closet, and it feels nice to wear it again. Because sometimes I have to lock that part of myself away. It's been, almost 7 years now. But I was obsessed with Tolkien. I was obsessed with C.S. Lewis, and I always just wanted to walk where my heroes walked. And it really is that simple. Like, as much as a piece of me, yes, of course, it's prestigious. I wanted to go and prove something, mostly to myself. I want to emphasize that it really was more about proving to myself that I could do it. It was much less about walking around saying it. But, I chased it down, and I worked my ass off to prove to myself that I could do it. I nearly killed myself trying to write papers that were good enough to get me into the exchange program. And then, to my shock, I got in and spent 6 months it was the first time academia was fun. And it was hard. Don't get me, it was really, really hard. But I learned so much, and it was, I don't know, it just kind of woke something up in me that I'd really like to do this, but I still wanted to go down a creative path. At that point, I was still very resistant to academia. I told myself I will never be a teacher, which, you say you're in English literature, everyone, oh, you're going to teach. Well, no. Which, flipping back to the drama thing, my summer job was teaching drama, and that's what got me into teaching. Thank you, Jen. Shout out to Jen Godwin Hughes for awakening my inner teacher. She's the one who pulled that out of me, and that was a moment of calling where it was like, wow, this is real. When people talk about the fulfillment of teaching, I'm like, wow, okay, that's a real thing, and I seem to be good at it, and I love doing it. So that became kind of like fold that thread in, that I had that little experience after getting back from Oxford that, okay, I've experienced academia and had a little bit of success in it in this very elite circle. I've proven I can do it. Then I found out, oh, I'm actually a good teacher. I like it. It's very meaningful to me. It's very fulfilling. So put those two pieces together, and I was beginning to open up to the idea. But in my mind, in all honesty, just out of pure emotion, I just wanted to go back to Oxford. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to be back there. So I applied for a master's, and a part of me, yes, of course, I was interested in the work. I was interested in the literature. But the goal really was just to be back there and then see what connections I could form. And, the ultimate dream, of course, would be BBC or something like that. As, you and I were always tossing around ideas for creative pitches that we wanted to throw out, which we still need to write that sitcom, by the way. It's only been eventually 12 years. No, 10 years. It's 10 years this year.
It is.
Geez, 10 years since the first time I set foot in the UK with you.
Mm-hmm. That was a good year. That was the year that I was...
That was good.
I was fresh off my longest trip to date in India, and I got home in, I want to say it was either the last day of August or it was early September, and we had talked about doing a very quick turnaround to go to England for a couple weeks, and I was a physical and mental wreck after that trip. I came home such a shell of myself, and you had already booked the flights or the hostels, or what was it as you answer a text?
Sorry, no, I was
I know what you're doing.
You know what I'm doing. No, I hadn't actually booked it. It was just that you and I had been talking about it for a long time, and
I still wanted to do it. I just was kind of hoping for more of a breather, but you're like, nope, this day we're heading up.
Well, I asked you. I did ask. I was texting you, I think while you were still traveling, saying, okay, we need to do this. If we're going to do this, we need to book it now. And you acquiesced. And I'm glad you did in hindsight, and I think you are too, because
I definitely am.
If we hadn't done it, it wouldn't have happened.
You said something, and when our two flavors of neurodivergence get together, things happen. And you said something last night at dinner that made me scroll through my entire Instagram account to find something from 2011. And in the process, I found all the pictures from in between India and Britain in 2012. And I had forgotten how condensed the window was between those two trips, because I remember my digestive system had been really torn up during that trip. Oh, yeah. And all I remembered was thinking, okay, I have 3 weeks to somehow get this horror show under control and stop just roto-rootering myself multiple times a day.
Thanks for that.
But thanks to some very strange advice, I did manage to correct my stomach just in time to make that trip. And
God bless mariachis.
yes, that I've roundtabled that to a few health professionals, and none of them can figure it out. So it's still fun. 10 years later,
It's the magic of Tex-Mex.
but who's calling?
Mumsy dear.
Yeah.
I will.
Anyway,
divert the
say all
call.
that to say, I remember picking myself up, going on that trip with you, and when we touched down, I've never seen you look so at home anywhere.
I
as
never
you-
felt so at home anywhere.
as you were in Oxford. I mean, South England in general was very much to your taste, but it was really cool as your brother, having known you, for your whole life, most of my life, and seeing you just display a kind of contentment in standing still that I'd never quite seen before. And where were we? We were commuting through London to go somewhere, and we jumped off the train at one of the universities. Which one was it? It was in central London somewhere.
I'm not sure. No, well, actually, no. We took the bus straight from Heathrow to Oxford.
I'm not saying immediately. I'm saying when we did that little university visit.
Oh, right. No, that was the drama school, actually.
Which university?
Okay, they've since changed. It's Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. I think it's one of the University of London campuses.
Okay, so it was University
or
of London.
sub college. Yeah, they are kind of the umbrella institution for a lot of.
I
yeah.
know. I was just trying to remember.
For
the
those who
university.
don't.
Yeah, well, this is for you and me. Other people can do the Googling and keep up.
Yeah.
But I remember we called in just to see, and they were so nice and stuck around the office. Like as they were on their way out, they waited to talk to you. And I feel really privileged to have been there to see like the birth of your exploration into going to school over there. Because as up and down as the last 2 years have been, I mean, it's really hard to imagine you doing as well as you've done or doing the quality of work that you've done anywhere else, just because I've never seen you so content to be anywhere as you were. In 2019, before the world caught on fire, I visited you where you are now. And, again, you were just self-assured and knew where you needed to be in a way that I had never seen before, which was just really cool.
Yeah, England has a very strange effect on me even now. Like the last couple of years, and I've spoken to a few people about this, and it's kind of hard. I'm a compulsive truth teller a lot of the time. It's hard for me to conceal when I have conflicted emotions. And really it's conflicted emotions that I can't hide. If I've got a definite one, I don't mind spinning it. But when I'm conflicted, I really don't do well covering that up. And the last 2 years, I mean, it's kind of a saga now, but like going from Oxford to, I'm now in the Northeast in Newcastle. I'm Newcastle upon Tyne, which is, just for point of reference, it's about an hour or so below Scotland, maybe hour by train-ish. It's pretty high up there. I've always been in the south or the central regions before, and this region is completely different. Obviously, you got like some of the same supermarkets, and a lot of the everyday life is very similar, but very different culture, different accent, different slang, different vibe, if you will. And it's not one that I'm comfortable with, if I'm honest. It's just, and you and I have, of course, spoken about this at length. It's, it's hard to explain that on the one hand, there are times when I'm walking, to the library or something, and I think I would still rather be here, even with all the sense of, I don't really want to stay here long term. This isn't really my place. These aren't my kind of people. I'd still rather be here than stuck at home.
Yeah, and to contextualize it, I mean, Newcastle is a very prestigious university, but if anything, the atmosphere of the city and the students they're in is closer to almost like a party school.
Very much so.
Because I know you felt very comfortable in the South because places like Oxford are a little more buttoned up. People can have a good time.
But
it's definitely not a party culture.
Well, I mean, it is, but I think
the same way though.
Not in the same way, no. So the thing about Oxford versus somewhere like Newcastle and Exeter as well, which is where I did my master's in the Southwest.
Oh, we completely jumped over that.
We completely jumped over that.
Between studying at Oxford and between your doctorate, there was a master's program.
There was. So you were asking me earlier about when the switch flipped from creative to academic. And it was, I applied to go back to Oxford because that contentment you described on our first trip, I can't even begin to explain even now, because I had the opportunity to visit Oxford again this summer for the first time in 4 years. And every time I go, it's exactly the same. I like to steal Jason Mendoza's line from the Good Place finale where he says, the air inside my body was the same as the air outside. That's how I feel when I'm there. Like, I'm getting emotional even thinking about it. It's like, I can't explain. I am so at one with the atmosphere. And it's the only time in my life my brain is quiet. And I can think straight. I can articulate in a way I can't anywhere else because I'm so in my element, and I've never felt that anywhere in the world. But that being said, I applied to go back and I didn't get in, and I was devastated. But up until that point, I had had some encouragement from professors, both in my time at Oxford and at my home university, saying that, like, you do have some real potential. You ought to chase this down. You really need to do a master's and even a doctorate. I'm like, no, I don't think that's for me. I had agreed. I thought about the master's because, again, I wanted to go back. I didn't. It was the first time I had enjoyed academia properly. I felt free to do it the way I wanted to do it. So I thought, hey, cool. Two birds with one stone. I get to do something I didn't expect of myself. I get to really dig into a field of literature that my undergraduate university was not equipped to teach. They didn't have a Victorian specialist. So I never got to really study my favorite period. So I thought, great, I can kind of fulfill that need and then also be where I want to be, and then just see what opportunities come from that. Because many great creators do come through Oxford. You end up with novelists, playwrights, TV stars, writers, actors. There's so much creativity that comes out of there, as well as academia. That's why it appealed to me so much. It's both all in one. Lots of great theater. You're so close to London. You can get up there in a couple of hours by bus. It's fantastic. And then they rejected me. And I was left with that question of, what am I going to do with myself? And there was something about that rejection letter that made me realize that I actually was kind of attached to the idea of going further with my education, that I actually did want to accomplish that next step. Even if I didn't fully know what I wanted to do with it. I'm like, well, actually, I think I do want this for itself. I'm really sad that I'm not going to get to do this. So that's when I was talking to my very, very dear friend from Oxford. I met him during my time abroad there, and we've been very close ever since. My friend Sam and we were on the phone, and he's like, did you hear back? I said, I did. They didn't take me, and I'm really disappointed. And I said, I feel like I still want to apply. I just don't know where, because I didn't know enough about the uni system over there. And he very kindly sent me a list of schools that he's like, these are some of the best for your subject. Give them a try. And I spoke with him a little bit about like application conventions, because that was part of the problem with my first application was there's differences between applying to an American uni versus a British one that I was not aware of. And so I got over some of those rookie mistakes by round 2. So I applied to 5 other universities, got into all of them, which I could not believe that happened. Right. That was the shock of my life. That was, again, just kind of, I took that as a bit of a sign from God that, like, yes, you're on the right path. This is what you're supposed to be doing. You can do this, and you can do it well. Like, okay, this is cool. So I ended up going to Exeter in the Southwest, and it was it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I had a great time there. They have a wonderful Victorian Studies department. And almost as soon as I got there, I was already opening my mind up to the idea of, well, you know what, maybe I could do academia, but I never saw myself as disciplined enough, because I was always very scatterbrained. I've always been very I'm pretty sure I'm an undiagnosed ADHD. Like my previous therapist has recommended I be tested for it. We never got around to it, but I think it's pretty clear, actually. Given everything else we do know about. But yes. Yeah.
I love you dearly, but that is
accurate. Hey, I'm not ashamed of it.
People underrate it. I mean, just as an aside,
oh, it's true.
It's when you're self-aware enough, any sort of neurodivergence, if you know what you're dealing with and can stay self-aware and handle yourself accordingly, it's a freaking superpower. I mean,
Oh, for real. I mean, I always say that my Asperger's diagnosis was the best gift I've ever been given, because I can now harness that instead of beating my head against this invisible wall of why can't I function like everyone else. It's like, oh, I'm not supposed to. Okay, well, how can I use this to my advantage? And I've
Right.
since, in my PhD, that's been very useful. But I went through my master's without that information. And
Yeah.
while I was there, I think within the first semester, I knew I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
That was my litmus test. Is like, do the master's, and if you do well, if you feel really sure that you can really love this enough, love the process enough, and commit yourself to really being good at it,
Right.
then I will go on to the PhD. So I made up my mind within the first semester that, yeah, I want to go on with this. I want to see what happens. But the PhD itself the application is the most soul crushing experience. That will leave you with some PTSD. But I know people laugh about that. I'm dead serious. It is not to be messed with, but
I remember that process. We talked a
it was
lot
bad.
during that time. And
it was bad.
it's similar to what all my friends who've been to law school. When they hit that 3L year and everything is happening at once. I mean, the academic process, regardless of your discipline, it's difficult for a reason.
It is. And honestly, I think it should be. Like, I hate to say this, like, as hard as it is, there's some ways I think it should actually be harder. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who go through that and still come up with absolutely useless stuff, which is a shame. And that's a fault of the universities for allowing it. And really,
It's a fault of a lot of things.
it's a fault of a lot of things. And we could go on for literally 2 hours about all the reasons that academia is completely and utterly screwing itself.
Not even just
but-
academia, but I mean college in general.
Yeah.
is still sold as something everyone should do.
Mm-hmm.
So colleges are saturated with people who don't quite exactly know where they need to be yet, and
Exactly.
and so much learning can be self-directed now that
Mm-hmm.
it really and I'm a camera monkey who's been flirting with the idea of entrepreneurship since he was 17. It's like I've always
Mm-hmm.
had a more of a bent towards the nonconformist route, so I know it makes me a little bit biased against people who, for whether rightly or wrongly, correctly or incorrectly, think they have to rely on school to get somewhere.
Right.
And being able to show that you can commit to a path of study and finish a degree will always be valuable, just as insight into your character. But people think they need degrees they might not actually need, or that they just need to be in school until they figure out what they need to do. And I just see less and less utility in that unless you know what you're going to do and you're
Right.
going to something that's hyper specialized, like what you're doing, or a medical track or an engineering track. That makes total sense, and that is necessary.
Oh, for sure.
But I've met a number of people who very casually say, I'm going back to school to figure out what I want to do. And that's always seemed kind of backwards to me, because it seems like you should figure out what you want to do, then go to school for it if you need to, not live on borrowed money to borrow more time, if that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
it just seems like it has diminishing returns for more people than I'm comfortable seeing. Yeah, I have a very compartmentalized mind, but
Well, ditto.
but the empathy has been overflowing lately for people who put themselves in that position, and it just seems like a path to more problems down the road.
Yeah, I mean, if I can interject on that, because obviously that's very near and dear to my heart, especially since I've now taught some college classes, and, it's really shocking when you realize how the sausage is made at institutions and where their priorities are, and it's mostly recruitment and undergraduate. I'm continually frustrated that as a researcher who falls into that category of someone that I need an advanced degree to do what I do. I want to be in this, for better or worse, I want to be in this world. I want to be doing this kind of work. You have to have the specialized access. I do need the guidance while I'm developing my knowledge base and my research practice. Yeah, I need all the facilities of a university to do that. But there are so many people who come in, and obviously I think it's wonderful to make education accessible. I'm all for making it accessible for those who truly want or need it. But I think it's that fine line
that there's a big difference between a philosophy of education where you try to sell everyone on this product of the college experience. And I think that's where the downfall is, more so than those who go to figure themselves out. Because if you're going to figure yourself out, I don't see a problem with that if you're willing to do the work. Because that's probably where you're going to find yourself, is in the work and the effort. Mm-hmm. Whether it's to say, you know what, that's not for me, I'm not going to go down that road. You've still put in the effort, you've still learned something.
Right.
But if you're just going to go to screw around and then sort of attend class once in a while and do just enough to pass so that you can get that piece of paper in hopes that it makes your CV more marketable, which, let's just be honest, these days, it really doesn't. It's become kind of a bare minimum requirement, but it doesn't need to be, and it really shouldn't be for most careers. For most careers, you should very much be able to start in as a low-level intern or apprentice and work your way up through experience. Now, that's not to say there isn't a benefit in many fields to that more theoretical approach that you get in college. That can be extremely helpful. And I'm not opposed to the idea that even a lot of fields could have that as an option, or even like a little gold star that, oh, well, you've done a degree in this. That might give you some extra insight. Cool. That doesn't automatically make you the best candidate for it. And I can attest to that. Lord knows I can attest to the quality of work I've seen from students that have done the work to get into uni, and then they don't want to put out any effort once they're there, or worse, they think because they did well in high school, that's the same level they're going to put out here. And because of certain social movements that I won't name for just the sake of our blood pressure, teachers are more and more constrained from telling kids the truth that, you know what, your work sucks, and you either need to put in the work or go get an apprenticeship and leave. Mm-hmm. If you want to party, do it on your own dime. Stop wasting institutional resources so you can, quote, have an experience. It used to be long ago, and we're talking hundreds of years ago, you know, that Oxbridge and, you know, whatever other universities came on after that in the U.S., obviously that would be like, you know, the Ivy Leagues, William and Mary, Harvard, you know, the really old ones. It was a philosophical experience. It was not about a degree per se. It's where you went just to learn things, piddle around what they call the ivory tower. It's a bunch of academics who spend their whole lives working, quote unquote, but not really producing anything. You might never publish a single thing in your whole life, but, you know, you've been working and studying.
Well, it was a luxury of the wealthy.
It was a luxury of the wealthy, but for some it was also there. But that's not to say that nothing good came out of it. You know, you still had, obviously, if you were like a minister, that's where you went to do your divinity school. So there were some applications for it. Obviously, civil servants usually go through that. Because they need that background. They need to be exposed to great literature, to philosophy, to, you know, great thought and ideas.
It was a more classical approach for
yes.
the clergy, for the legal professionals of the day.
Right. So they needed it. And so it's not to say it was completely divorced from application or reality, but much of the time it was the luxury of the rich, which in itself could be very much a problem. I mean, maybe not we've all seen Jeeves and Wooster. I mean, if you really just look at Boris Johnson, I'm sorry, he's the perfect picture of someone with an absolute gold star education, Eton, Oxford. He's a moron. He's an absolute bloody moron.
Didn't you say you had a friend who watched him do a walkthrough and he pointed at a printer and literally said, what does that machine do?
So Newcastle has some laboratories. It's a very industrial part of the country. There's a lot of labs, a lot of like medical supply, I guess, or it was a medical lab. And yeah, he was doing a walkthrough during the pandemic. It was one of his many photo ops where he tried to look like, you know, he always puts on a white jacket and holds a syringe for photographs everywhere he goes. And it's like, no. But yeah, so he's walking through this lab, and a friend of mine at the university apparently said that he's walking through, oh, and what's that? Oh, yeah. Oh, very good. Very good. Oh, and what is this machine? It's a printer, Prime Minister. Right. Says the man who recently lectured an entire business group on Peppa Pig World. It's not good, guys. But anyway, let's move on from that. But the point is, education used to, on the one hand, be kind of a beautiful philosophical journey for some people, if you will pardon that little, that word has been taken by so many people who don't deserve it. you know, it had its good and its bad points, but there was a time when it really was about finding yourself and about just bettering yourself through knowledge. And then it became this very industrialized system of more so what it is now, where it's not just about producing knowledge, because then it became, I think, about producing knowledge. It became a little bit more focused on output, which some of that is a good thing. You know, like none of us would produce anything without deadlines. We're writers like anyone else. You got to have a deadline to actually be bothered to put anything together. But a lot of people say the golden age was maybe the 80s, which of course, you know, we can argue about. Yes, it was exclusionary to certain demographics, and that is very true. But that part is
the 1980s.
1980s, yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, that part has gotten much better. It's more accessible to more people. But the problem is what we've exchanged is back then there was much more freedom of thought. You weren't expected to publish every 5 minutes, regardless of quality or content. You were given some freedom that, well, I want to work in this area. Okay, here's some funding. Go do it and teach a few classes for us. Okay. It was a very, for some, you know, for those who made the most of it, it was very productive and great time. But what it's turned into in the last however many years, as we've, you know, what you're talking about, the way it's been pushed is like, this is something everyone needs to do. We need to have the experience. We need to, you know, you need this to get a job. Well, no, you don't. But we've been sold this bill of goods where it's been subsidized, it's been marketed, and turned into just this post-adolescent amusement park. You know, come in here, you're going to pay a crap ton of money that's probably borrowed or provided by your parents to party and make friends, which, yes, that, sure, do that. We all have to blow off steam, but like for most people, that's why they're there, and it shows in their work. And you can tell which ones are there to learn and which ones are there to party. You can spot it very quickly, and it's not always about the quality of the work. It's their willingness to learn. It's their willingness to try and to take what you give them and do better next time. And I just see far too many people being allowed in who are not even remotely competent. And I'm not talking about exceptional. I'm talking basic, baseline ability to communicate a meaningful sentence in their native language. I have so many kids who cannot write a sentence that is even comprehensible, let alone meaningful. And it's like, how did you get into a prestigious college?
Well, what attracts those minds to an English program? Because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but growing up, and a lot of people don't know this about me, but I was into creative writing before I ever got into photography. The photography came later, and that kind of took the reins. But I always enjoyed English classes and the language-based classes at school because I already had appreciation for words and using them. Even if I wasn't always at my best, I enjoyed the process. Now, these students coming in who are so ill-equipped for collegiate level English work, what is their motivation for being there if they are not putting forth the effort? And you use that important qualifier in their native language, because I know there's a big melting pot at your university.
Well, sort of.
Well, I mean,
not as much.
People from all over the world
Newcastle,
do come there.
Yeah,
and
mostly for the business school, but yeah.
Well, you have a very international group of friends, as you stated it to me, which is cool.
True. Yeah,
but when someone's there doing an English track, or even just a writing track, and they are writing in their native language, if English isn't their first language, what attracts them to do creative writing if they're lacking both innate talent and preparation from their prior school?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, I don't teach creative writing, not currently, although I would love to. But yeah, you know, I wish I knew how to answer that, because I actually have asked that. Like when I teach, I always try to get to know my students, and I use that as a way to break the ice with them that, hey, tell me, you know, what got you interested? Why are you here? What drives you to do this? And I would dare say most of them will just say, oh, well, you know, I just love literature. I really love it. I love it. Every now and again, you get someone with a more specific idea. Like I had one girl say, well, I'm actually very interested in fashion, but I really love looking at how, you know, fashion is represented through literature and media, which is really, you know, that's very interesting. You've got some who maybe are more like me. They're interdisciplinary. You know, I enjoy history and literature together. I love looking at some like the more contemporary stuff. So they look at contemporary issues in relation to literature. And all of that's fine. You know, I mean, these are good motivations to study it if you want to take it somewhere. But very few have been able to give me a real specific career trajectory, which, you know, they're 17, 18 years old. Like, if you're not sure, that's fine. I mean, you know, again, you don't have to come in knowing what you want out of this. You just need to be willing to work and learn from the experience and really give it what it takes. But what I find with a lot of them is just they enjoy doing it at, you know, over there they have what they call A levels, which is like once you've done your bare minimum exams, which is the GCSEs, and I'm going to butcher this explanation, I'm sure. That's kind of like your base qualifier that like you've completed a significant amount of school. If you do well enough on those, you can go forward towards a university track. You take A levels, which is like the more advanced study where it's much more specialized. You're preparing to go into a particular field, is how it usually works. So you start specializing much earlier on. And that way, I think it's supposed to kind of help you slide into university life more easily. But sadly, as with so many school systems, it tends to fail to really prepare them for it. It's a very oversimplified approach that leaves them with zero critical writing skills and a very, very sort of shallow understanding of things. Like they're good at buzzwords. Let's put it that way. They come out with a lot of buzzwords, and they think a good paper is one that basically describes half a book and uses a lot of buzzwords. That, you know, this is a feminist text because the patriarchy pushes the girl down and then she fights back because patriarchy and feminism. And here's a famous person who said something about it. You know, it's like
where there could be a finer point to be drawn out. They're just existing on the surface.
Right. And it's not even that their points are always, you know, sure, it might be a feminist text, but you got to go further than just patriarchy. Well, okay, tell me why there's one.
Right.
Tell me how that's constructed.
Yeah.
Tell me what the real obstacle is. How does that materialize in the story?
Contextualize it in the author's time.
Contextualize it. Oh my gosh, don't even get me started on that. Because of course I work in historical literature. I work mostly in 19th century, but you know, I've studied across several periods, and of course we have to teach across many, many different periods and genres. We you know, when you're a student teacher, you have to do all the general intro classes. So you have to rapidly educate yourself on many things, but trying to get them to go below surface level issues like that. And it's like, I'm not saying your point is altogether wrong, but you got to actually make the point. You can't just say reasons. You can't just say a buzzword and expect me to go, yes.
One of my favorite blocks of text from all time is in Rudolf Arnheim's book. I think he wrote it in, I want to say 1954, but it was called Film as Art. And I'm going to quote this as accurately as I can. Please leave room for mistakes. But he said, television is a new, hard test of our wisdom. For it used to be with language, we had to draw the specific from the general using words, whereas television allows us to simply point the finger. And I read that in college in 2011, full 10 years ago now, more than 10. And that I read it in the library. Since then, I bought the book. It's on my shelf in the other room. And I've always been concerned if you just replace television with technology or digital media or social media, whatever demon you want to wrestle with in the course of a discussion. I was very concerned that, you know, technology and changes in communication is almost like white noise. It's always operating in the background, but rarely the changing tides rarely call attention to themselves. It's like standing on the beach. Like you're standing on the beach and the sand is hard packed beneath you. Next thing you know, a wave suddenly touches your feet and you shift, and it creeps up on you if you stand in one place long enough. And I feel like that has been I don't want to go full boomer here and just, just scream into the void about, the kids and their phones. But there is something that has made me nervous for years when I think about that. And I think about how, if you pull up, I love to hate on TikTok, so I'm just going to go for it here.
Oh, please do.
You see the videos where people are mugging hard for the camera, basically rocking from side to side and quite literally pointing their finger at words on the screen. And I saw that when that became a trend and was actually pretty horrified because I saw the literal fulfillment of Rudolf Arnheim's, unconscious prophecy there. And I don't envy people in a teaching position right now who have to work overtime to get kids to understand that, hey, not everyone has lived the life you've lived. You can't just say this thing. You have to break it down and elucidate it so that anyone who reads this, regardless of where they come from or where they're going, can understand your position. And even if they don't agree, they can appreciate the argument you've made.
Right. And
then we can move forward. And I'm really scared that that's going to go away.
Unfortunately, it's already happening. I mean, that's been one of the hardest things I've been wrestling with even now. And you and I, again, have talked about this a lot off mic, that, I'm wrestling with my future because this industry I've committed myself to, in this calling I thought that I had, and I do think it's still there, but like, we are being constantly hampered institutionally to cater to this mentality. We're not allowed to tell students that I literally cannot understand your grammar. Go take the free remedial classes that we offer at the library and come back later. We're not allowed to say it in so many words, or if we do, we have to be very careful not to hurt their little feelings. And it's like,
well, you should always be kind about it.
Well, absolutely. And I would never, advocate for being unkind, but I'm a very hard grader. I'm a very OCD grader. And again, add that to the list of undiagnosed but very self-evident comorbidities that I have in my neurodivergent mind. But, whenever I grade, it's like, these aren't just like splicing commas. Anyone can make that mistake. I make that mistake sometimes. Like, it happens, you get distracted or you just don't think it through. But when I, honest to goodness, cannot even understand what you're saying, they misuse words. They leave out particles or use the wrong one. And I mean, sentence constructions, I don't even, like, it looks like a word jumble.
Yeah.
And they think because they use multi-syllable terms, which half the time they are using wrong, and because, again, they pick a hot topic, use big words, repeat themselves a lot, and somehow in their mind that qualifies as a great argument, and it shocks them to no end.
It's going to make great at politics.
Well, when I ask them, and why is this the point? How did you get from A to B?
Right.
You might be correct, but then again, you also might want to look at that term because I don't think it means what you think it means. I really want to give all my feedback in Princess Bride memes. I mean, most of it could be summarized in, I don't think that word means what you think it means. And a few very honest exclamations of, inconceivable!
I mean, that film is surprisingly prescient. I mean,
yeah.
I think I sent a little clip of Vicini to a few people when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan back in August.
Oh, dear.
And so the classic blunder, never get involved in a land war in Asia. I mean, you would think that if Wallace Shawn is saying these things, they would have sank into the national consciousness beyond just popular entertainment. But no, apparently the writers are smarter than certain people within certain governments. But
right. Well, I mean, but coming back to my point, like, I was still kind of building towards this idea that, like, it's gotten to a degree where, I mean, I've had to argue with my senior teachers about, like, there's a reason I gave this a terrible grade, and you want to give points because they tried. It's like, no, they didn't. This is not even trying. This is painful. And when I have conversations with my students, I can see they're smart. It's like, I know you can do this, but they have zero ability to express themselves. No one has ever told them that this does not cut it. This is not an argument. This is a series of observations
Right.
that are often non sequitur. And again, completely incomprehensible grammatically speaking. I don't know what you're trying to say. I don't really get where you jump from A to B. And even if I can spend 10 minutes sorting it out, which let's just be honest, you know, I'm the teacher. Of course I can look at this and kind of backtrack. Oh, I bet that's what they were trying to argue. But that doesn't get you points because I can backtrack. I shouldn't have to do that.
Right. And I remember
You know?
in my own experience, you know, my degree started out in history when I went to college. And when I went as a dual enrollment student to our local community college, I was able to test through both English Comp 1 and 2, which I think you did as well. And, you know, I passed them by just basically taking the finals before I even started. And apparently my working knowledge of grammar and syntax and sentence construction, that was all passable to skip a couple classes and get done with the first 2 years faster. But when I got to my actual nuts and bolts of the degree at UWF, constructing more formalized essays around history and literature, I'll be honest, it was a rude awakening for me because I had never had to be that so much of the writing I had done had either been creative writing or it had been book reports or just, you know, talking about things I had read other people do. But to start with a thesis statement, set up a premise, and bring it all the way into the station for a conclusion, I had never had to write in such a formalized way before, especially within the history realm where the citations and the bibliography are very formally presented and so important to your grade and to just making your case. You know, take the grade out of it, just making a case that you can sleep with is good. And it gives me empathy for people in your student's position because it's not easy, but at the same time,
Of course.
It's funny how even on this side of the pond, with my very different experience than people tend to have, because I mean, you know, homeschooling and dual enrollment, I don't think is nearly as common in the UK as it is over here.
Absolutely not.
And to have such different experiences and see that it's still such a problem is interesting. And, you know, I have thoughts that I'm in no way qualified to have on paper, but it makes me curious as to which way the world is moving as far as preserving the ability to present ideas. Because I think I'm kind of existing on other people's thoughts for this conversation, but there's another quote I dearly love. And I think I've said it in a previous episode here before, but it's Oscar Wilde when he was writing to his boyfriend. Was it Lord Percy was his name? I always blank out.
I think so.
Lord Albert. Albert failed to make Oxford, and Oscar Wilde wrote him a letter and said, you know, it doesn't really matter to me that you didn't get into Oxford. Many people have applied and not gotten in. It's doesn't make you any less of a person.
No.
But would be the tragedy would be for you to complete your education anywhere and not acquire the Oxford manner, which I describe as the ability to play gracefully with ideas. And that is something that is so much more important than any sort of formalized degree. And that plays into the broader cultural conversation that we're having across the world right now with speech and censorship and political extremes and people going at war with friends and family alike on ideologies on both sides of the aisle. And it brings me physical pain sometimes to see it happen, because regardless if people agree, and I'm ideologically homeless, I can agree and disagree with everyone on something, and it makes a little difference to me, because if you've got two well-intentioned people approaching each other in good faith to just talk and understand each other, that should be able to happen.
Absolutely.
And going to school and learning to learn, which I think is the best thing you can get. If you just go with no clear degree path, learning to learn is wonderful if that's what you want to do.
Exactly.
And
Absolutely.
And that's where, coming back to what you were saying earlier about the idea of college that's sold to us, where that really structurally needs to change is
Yes.
we need to quit talking about the college experience as a social one and talk about it more as personal development, where you are learning to learn and learning to talk all over again.
Precisely. It's about being able to communicate your ideas effectively. And that's something, and just to clarify, like I can be a real ogre when it comes to my grading because, it's just, I'll be honest, having worked as hard as I have to also overcome that transition from that less formal homeschool environment where we could just free associate all day long, which was great. It's great for intellectual development, but at some point you do have to learn how to institutionalize your presentation. And, unless you're creative or a blogger or something, but even then there's aspects of formal writing that are important.
It's good to be able to tighten it up
Yes.
and communicate with some economy of words.
Right. So I always say that I like to learn the rules of anything I do so I can break them effectively. And that's how I see writing as well. And so when I talk about my students, and I know I can be a little harsh sometimes, that's really what I'm getting at is like, my problem is not that they come in struggling to communicate. They have been failed by the schools. And I would like to make that very, very clear. They have been set up in many ways by their system to think they're a lot more advanced than they are. And it's a shock to them to come in and realize you're actually expected to grow beyond this. And that's, again, because I think we've sold this very mediocre notion of university life. That you come in, you're going to take some classes, you are going to learn stuff, you're going to get a degree, you're going to blah, 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 but you're going to have all these experiences. And it's like, yes, you are and you should, but that's not what being at university is about. You can do that without university. You can party without university, and you should be able to do that either way. But what I see when I look at these horrible essays, it's not the end of the world that someone can't write a grammatically flawless, poignant, meta-analysis of the post-colonial feminist ramifications of Jane Eyre. Fine, that's not going to get you ahead in life on its own. But being able to reasonably articulate an idea to someone else in a way that is sensible, clear, and well-structured will get you very far in life. So really my problem, it's not, like I've given very high grades to someone who isn't that pleasant to read, but I understand their ideas. They may not be eloquently expressed, but they are clear and they are cogent and they actually say something. So you don't have to be the best writer of all time to actually get the higher grade. More often than not, it's the students who, my issue is the students who clearly think that by putting all the trimmings and trappings on, that's a sign of exceptionalism, and it's not. And the worst part is that's being reinforced by the system. Mediocrity is being rewarded because we're not allowed to call it what it is. That does not mean these students are bad people. It doesn't mean they aren't smart. What hurts me physically as a teacher is that I want to sit down and help you. I want you to communicate your idea clearly because I think there is an idea here. More often than not, you can see the seed of the idea. You know what they're trying to say, but it's just not coming out. And what I see every time I'm told, well, let's bump up that grade a few points. They tried. They ticked this box. Give them a higher grade. What I see is when they write that letter to apply for a job and their boss can't understand what they're saying.
Right.
When they're trying to apply for, if they go on to postgrad and they don't know how to articulate how they got from A to B. They don't know how to articulate, this is what I want to study and why. That's what I see is we're setting you up to think that not being clear, not putting in extra effort, and not having the humility to ask for help when you need it. And we offer free classes. We have free tutoring. We have every resource available that even if you have a lesser privileged background, so we're here to help you catch up. I had people do that for me, and it wasn't because I wasn't privileged in a sense, but when you're raised in an alternative environment, it's just different. We weren't groomed for university. We were, intellectually very ready for it and hungry for it.
Right.
We did fine. We transitioned very easily. But in terms of the formal aspects, I had a lot of teachers mentor me. I had a lot of people say, you have potential, but you need to learn structure. You need to clarify your thoughts. You need to connect the dots. And over the years, I've taken that feedback. I've worked at it very hard, and I still get that feedback all the time from my supervisors. So it's not like I'm saying I've got it all figured out. None of us does. But it's just, I think too many people come into university unprepared for what it takes to actually be exceptional. And that's my worry is, I think my worry is simply that university is no longer a place of saying, I am here to be challenged so I can be something more. Mm-hmm. It's becoming a place where people say, I want to do the same thing I'm already doing. I just want to do more of it. I want to get applauded for it and then get a job when I'm done. And party, during the, party and make friends throughout. And I think that's where I get really, really frustrated. And the universities are neglecting the students who do want to put in that effort, who do want to use it as a stepping stone for a concrete career. Those are the ones getting left behind because the rest of us are too busy cleaning up after the students who don't care.
Right.
We can't invest in the ones who do. And for those of us in research or for those of us in the more specialized areas, we are often used, we are criminally underpaid for what we're doing. They take such advantage of student teachers. And like during the pandemic, I felt, and I wrote this in myself and several others wrote this in multiple reports to our department, that we feel that we've been used to keep the undergraduates happy while we've been neglected. Mm-hmm. We're being treated as freelancers and not even respected freelancers. We're just here to keep the money coming in from the undergrads.
Do you see that as a symptom of something incredibly nefarious, or just of the school's emphasis on recruitment and keeping students coming in?
Well, I think that is the nefarious part.
But you know what I mean? It's not like there's some grand cabal trying to keep people stupid as much as they're just trying to keep the university funded.
Yeah.
It's a lot of landscaping to pay for.
Bingo. I think that's my whole thing is the emphasis on recruitment comes from, the UK, a lot of universities are funded by the government. The same is true here, but the system's a little different. And, I can't really speak to the differences right now, but in terms of my experience, my university is public funded, so taxpayer money. So we want output. We want to see that we're getting something back. You have to justify the funding you get. So I think what ends up happening is you get a lot of business people and lawyers who have never taught a class in their life sitting in a boardroom going, how can we make the university more profitable?
Yeah.
Because government funding only goes so far. And there is such an expectation now to compete. It's built a competition that is not the healthy free market kind that you and I are always shilling for. It is a simulated world of here are the expectations, and you're constantly pitted against other universities for, we have the best student experience. We have the best housing. Come to us. We'll give you this experience. And it's like, it's become... struggling to find the words. It's just, I always just say, it's like, it's become like an amusement park. It's like, it's your country club that we have more amenities. Come for our amenities.
Right.
And, if you get an education, good for you. But.
And this comes back to something that you and I have discussed before, is that you and I do what we do because we basically had no choice in the matter. I'm familiar with the time. I just looked.
Yeah.
We do what we do because we have no choice in the matter.
Very true.
Whether we were doing it for money or not, you would be writing and I would be taking photos. There's just, however much predestination or destiny or whatever you want to call it, however much that plays into it, we are who we are and we'd be doing what we were doing. So we approach what we do with great purity. So for you, it's a great personal affront to not have the academics and the learning to learn prioritize. Same way I get consistently annoyed when I meet photographers who only do photography to get attention or to get laid. It's like,
exactly.
It's like that's allowed. I mean, you can be whoever you want to be doing what you do. But to me personally, as a matter of taste, I find that to be a perversion of the art form, because for me, it's something I do because if I don't get the ideas out, I don't sleep at night.
Yeah.
And I barely sleep as it is. So I need all the help I can get. So therefore, why are you this way? So, but you and I have a tendency to tweeze out everything we see that's wrong with the world. And we are about to be very late for dinner someplace. So what is the best part? What is the positive part that you're gleaning out of this experience when you're not berating a student for their inability to communicate an idea about the patriarchy? What makes you happy in the process? And let's try to end on a positive note.
Oh, for sure. And there are so many positives that, as you say, we both get so hung up on our idealism. I think we forget how much we love what we do. I think for me, I mean, it's a lot of little things, but I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, I love the work. I love what I do. I love the research that's coming out of it. I mean, the pandemic has obviously made it hard to have the full experience I was hoping for. I was really looking to travel more. I was looking to go to more, conferences and all that. Unfortunately, they've all been over Zoom. I think the best part has I have met some really amazing people in not just in my field, but just in broader academia. I have an amazing boss that I'm a research assistant for in the computer science department, actually, who's opened some doors to make at least some domestic travel open to me, and just who's been an advocate and a support. My supervisors are amazing. I love them both, and they really inspire me a lot. So I think that's the best thing. And that's really what you want. You want to meet the right people. You want to be in the right place where you can do what you got to do and do it at your best. And I do think that with all of the BS around it, I love the academic environment, and I'm very, very lucky to be with some people that are really fun and really kind and interesting. And it's a beautiful city. It's historic, and I am very grateful that I get to live out my dream of living abroad, even if it's not quite how I pictured it this time around. I do know it's going to open doors in the future, and I am grateful, whatever it may sound like. I really, really am. I know I'm very lucky to have lived the life that I have so far.
Well, on that note, it's really good to have you home for a while.
Thanks. It's good to be home.
And right now we have two very hungry parents blowing up our phones saying, why aren't y'all at dinner yet? So let's call it here. And I was very bullish on only being on mic with you while you were here in person. Mm-hmm. But hopefully I can get over myself. And once you're back on the other side of the Atlantic, we can do some stuff over Zoom or something and find a way to sync up the audio, because the lag always just drives me insane. That's why I resist the whole long distance discussion, because it's just frustrating.
Oh, for sure.
But anyway, all right, sis.
All right, bro.
Move on. Thank you for indulging me.
Ditto. Ditto.
All right. Later, y'all.